Miami Hurricanes are coming home to play for a national championship. Miami took care of business in the desert, defeating Ole Miss. Dramatic football game. Carson Beck winning touchdown. The prize, Fernando Mendoza and the undefeated Indiana Hoosiers, who absolutely smoked Oregon in the Peach Bowl in the other semifinal. And now, Carlos Ledo, it's time to go win that sixth ring, brother.
It's time to get it. Well, you see the Dolphins hat on, so you know we're ready to go, right? This is the championship Dolphins hat. We've been going Stormtrooper uniforms all playoff long, so I had to go Stormtrooper for the final podcast here before the national championship. And if people think, I keep hearing this shit in the media, and I just got to address this immediately, how Indiana is unstoppable. They're heading towards being the greatest champion of all time, how they're just the toughest team that nobody can beat. They're going to steamroll Miami. You just said they smoked Oregon. Buddy, we all know the stuff in Miami is a lot stronger to smoke and harder to smoke, from what I've heard. I have no experience with it. I'm just saying.
You're just saying, yeah. All right, let's start here, Carlos, because we got a show full of a lot of stuff that people want to talk about, including who the quarterback for next season is going to be. Because while these playoffs have been ongoing and Mario and the Hurricanes have been singularly focused on winning a national championship, the rest of the college football world has been progressing and going through free agency since January 2nd. And a lot of quarterbacks, Carlos, have come off the board, including a couple that Miami was very, very interested in. They have committed elsewhere. I don't know what the plan is for 2026. We will talk about that. We will talk about the matchup with Indiana. But first, I want to start with the emotions for you at home. I was in Phoenix. I was there for the game. Wonderful experience. Love the Camelback resort that I stayed at in Phoenix. It was absolutely beautiful, about 45 minutes away from stadium. Cold, rainy. I mean, we had some hail. Thank God we were indoors. But a thrilling football game. And quite honestly, I could not write. I was terrified over the last 7 minutes of the fourth quarter. Every time I started to write something, Carlos, the game changed. And I couldn't focus. I literally had to wait for the game to end before I could start writing. And then I ran down to the field. I talked to a bunch of players. Very emotional night talking to former Hurricanes and just people in general around the university. Such a big moment to clinch the first trip back to the national championship since 2002 season. But for you, how did you ingest that game? I told you it was going to be close. I told you I expected it to come down to the wire, and it lived up to it.
Well, listen, my score was more respectable, 27-24. It was a 4-point game, so I was closer in a sense.
I nailed this. You nailed the spread. No, you didn't. None of us nailed the spread. None of us 31-30. Yeah.
Yeah. But either way, listen, what it was for me was when you're watching that game unfold, the Hurricanes are dominating that game from start to finish. 40 minutes of time of possession, 80 plays. This game could have and should have been a blowout. But all those things that we discussed throughout the year started rearing their ugly heads again. The penalties, the mistakes, the not finishing drives, dropping turnovers, 4 interceptions dropped, then letting this team hang around and come back. They have that freaking mule of a kicker that was basically automatic. He doinked one off, and he says, the next one I'm going to doink it in. He's like calling a shot. I can't believe this guy. All that stuff is unfolding, and I'm thinking to myself, shit. At halftime, I'm thinking, is this the way it's going to unfold? It's going to unroll now. It's going to unravel because we're doing all the things that we said we weren't going to do, that we had eliminated in terms of mistakes. But the one thing that gave me hope was Mario Cristobal actually managed the clock well in this game. And when I saw that happen, I said, no, you know what? The Lord is smiling upon us today because we are eliminating the one last demon. That last demon that needed to be exercised for this team to finally get through and get to the other side. The question was, can this guy coach a team? Can he execute on the sideline and not hurt his team, but help his team win? And with his clock management, he actually did this time. He actually called good timeouts. He actually gave them enough time at the end to get down there and score. And it was a situation where you never felt that the Hurricanes were dead in the water. I think for me, I was nervous because of the way the game was unfolding. But I gained confidence in that fourth quarter because they were starting to get explosive plays and they were starting to let Carson Beck get loose a little bit, and he was gaining confidence. So to me, I just felt like this was their game at the end. I felt like they were going to pull it out. My wife has a teacher's assistant who's a Florida State fan of all things, and her parents are Hurricane fans. So they were throwing a party at the house, and they were grilling, they were doing all kinds of stuff. And I told her during the day, I was like, listen, your parents are making steak and lobster and all kinds of shit. You better not touch a single piece of food. You better eat McDonald's because that's what you deserve as a Florida State fan. You better not eat that food because you're not a Hurricane. Okay. She called when Ole Miss scored that last touchdown with about 3 minutes left and was like ragging, oh, it's Carlos losing it. Carlos losing it. I had my hands folded. I was like, no, it's cool. Plenty of time. We got timeouts left. We'll be all right. Don't worry about it. This is football. This is what you came to see. If you told me at the beginning of the season that the Hurricanes were going to be driving with 3 minutes left to score to take a chance for a chance to win to get to the national championship, I would have said, "Listen, man, I'll take it all day, every day, whatever the result." And it was euphoric because it wasn't just about getting to the national championship, man. And you know how it is. It's
Yeah.
been 23 years of getting kicked in the nutsack hard
Yeah.
by this team, losing to, not just losing to Ohio State, getting drilled by LSU twice, losing that game in the Orange Bowl to close it out against Virginia, the Middle Tennessee loss, the loss to FIU, players that have come through here like Duke Johnson, Kenny Phillips, Devin Bush, all sorts of guys that have come through here without a championship or a chance to even play for one. And this team pulled it out. It was great to see because we talked a lot about the last couple of years about what it takes to win, and it's not just recruiting; it's also culture.
Yeah.
And this to me was the culture stamp. It was the stamp that showed that their mental toughness had gone from that team that would lose a game to Florida State and then just reel off another 3 losses in a row. That team that would fold late in games because they didn't know how to win. This team has now elevated itself, not just from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, and a culture standpoint of being that team that could take on whatever happens adversity wise and fight back. So I'm proud of this team. The icing on the cake, the sugar on top, that little cherry is going to be the national championship. But like I said before, the journey is what we're going to remember. Who they had to beat to get here, what they had to do after SMU, the things they had to do to right the ship, the guys that stepped up as leaders to be able to take this team from, we're just a bunch of guys that are collected together to try and win, to being a family and a team that fights for each other to make sure they get to where they need to get to. On top of the fact that they had like over 20 guys with the flu, and that flu that's going around right now, it's whooping people's asses, and they were out there playing football, and I can't believe it.
Yeah, really remarkable when you think about just the overall health of this team and bumps, bruises, and then you throw the flu into it all. Mark Fletcher was among those guys that was really banged up, with the flu and still ran for 133 yards, had a phenomenal day. Again, we're going to get into this game a little bit more here, Carlos. But the bigger point, the bracket busting, the getting here as the number 10 seed, the last team to get into the field, to writing it out in some tough games, right? Winning, prevailing at Texas A&M, beating the unbeatable Ohio State, right? The defending champs, and then really, I think, dominating this game and then still winning in spite of all the mistakes. Like it's been a beautiful tale for Mario Cristobal to get to this point and to be what is it, 6 or 7-0 now against ranked opponents, and now you get this Indiana team who is an absolute train. They're a wagon, brother. Like the way they're playing football right now, you have to give Kurt Signetti and his guys um, a lot of credit. They are not making mistakes and they are capitalizing on everybody else's mistakes. And we're going to talk about this game and the matchup, and we got all kinds of cool stuff to get into. But to me, I've had conversations with a lot of people today, including Michael Ryan Ruiz, the producer for the Levitard show, and a guy who is a Golden Cane. He's given a lot of money to the university to help them, and been a voice, a very big supporter of the Hurricanes. Harry Rothwell, who's runs the
All Canes,
bookstore
baby.
now, but was just the store for many years with all the merchandise, the autograph signings. I reached out to a couple of fans that are part of the traveling crew that go on the road for all the road games. I mean, Rudy Fernandez, Brian Callahan, who's the guy from Canes United. Like, this is a group, Carlos, that Like this guy told me he's already spent over $6,000 going to the Cotton Bowl and then going out to Phoenix to be there to support the Canes. And he's got 2 tickets for the game. We know how much the ticket prices are going for. Again, the people that this matters to, right? Like this goes beyond Mario Cristobal and the people in the administration, like just the fans, the people who have loved this team for the last 20, 25 years and suffered through so many horrible moments, as you mentioned earlier, where it was just hard. Like you didn't see brighter days coming. And even when Mario got here at first, it was like 5-7, lose to Middle Tennessee State, struggle, lose the game against Georgia Tech, don't take the knee, the criticisms. It was hard to see Miami recovering and figuring this thing out, even though I had faith that Mario could build a good roster, right? It was like, man, when are they going to learn? When is Mario going to learn? And it's like Mike Ryan told me today, he's like, the SMU loss, right? We've talked about it on the show. The way Mario responded since that game and basically saying, we're not going to play tight anymore. And I think to that drive, right, with 3 minutes to go, down, a score to Ole Miss, and you can play for the field goal or you can play for the touchdown. And I didn't, I'm watching them drive down the field there in Phoenix, and I'm just like, dude, like a lot of these plays are coming down to third down throws with Carson Beck, and he's having to make them. And they get to the 3-yard line. There's 24 seconds left. I think everybody in the building is like, dude, run it, right? You got a timeout left. Nope. Carson Beck drops back, can't find anybody open, runs into the end zone. And like, to me, it's like every time I'm ready to doubt these guys and I'm ready to say that they're going to fall apart, it's going to wilt, something bad's going to happen, they keep delivering.
Yeah, and we talked about Mario needing to have a moment where he looked himself in the mirror and decided that he couldn't have a stranglehold on the entire program. He would have to trust his coaches. He would have to trust his players. He now shopped for the groceries like we talked about. He handpicked all these guys, whether it was through recruiting or the transfer portal. All these guys are handpicked by him. At some point, he had to let them loose and trust in them to execute and do what they needed to do and believe in them, because he honestly believed in them when he said he wanted them as Miami Hurricanes, and they believed in him. So it was time to give that trust back to them and put that on their shoulders, not just the players, but the staff. And he did that. And he talked about, the meeting he had after that and the way he's changed. And you notice now on offense, before that Mike was always down on offense. That Mike's been up for a while, ever since SMU. He's allowed Shannon Dawson to do so. But as much as I've criticized Shannon Dawson for his play calling, and he had a couple moments in this game again, but the one thing I will say is he finally evolved the offense, or maybe he was allowed to evolve the offense. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes, to do things in a way that we've discussed that needed to happen. He injected Pringle. He started running up the ball a little bit more outside. He changed up the way he got his run looks. And I'll give you it comes down to me to one thing with how they've run this offense over the last, including really the playoff run. It's one formation. One formation has made a huge difference for this team. Tight bunch and bunch on the outside. How many plays do they run out of those formations? The reason why they've been doing that, he went to the NFL. He looked at the 49ers. He looked at the Rams. He looked at even the Dolphins. That Shanahan tree, they love running tight bunch because it gives an additional amount of gaps. It creates a larger surface area for the defense to adjust to, but it also keeps your quicks in, which allows you to basically have the full playbook while creating more gaps for the defense to defend in the run game. And what they've done incredibly well now is they've injected, these receivers into the run game, inserting and doing different things and motioning that creates more problems for the defense and creates better angles for these guys to run. And now what you've done is, because you're creating different angles, you're not just lining up like you were before statically and coming downhill and trying to beat people with just power. Now you're using power and angles and different looks to get to the things you like, and incorporating different plays to try and stress the defense, like the play that everybody's been covering over the last 2 weeks, that full false pull tunnel screen that they like to run, because now you're occupying a linebacker with the false pull. You're creating a different look. You're stressing the defense on multiple levels, and you are giving them a lot to think about. It looks simple, but what they're doing is effective. And credit to the offensive staff, credit to Corey Heatherman for coming up with incredible game plans throughout the playoffs. He did a great job during the regular season, but he's taking it to a different level here in the playoffs.
Yeah. Look, I think defensively, this was the most stress game that they've had in the playoffs, and clearly because Trinidad Chambliss is a monster, right? He's really good quarterback. He's a guy who's probably going to be, I think, have a chance to make an impact on the NFL roster here soon, because he plays like a Russell Wilson, undersized, small, but makes so many good decisions. Good Russell Wilson, not the old Russell Wilson.
Yeah, no.
Um, and
Seattle in the prime.
and that offense was tough. Like, credit to their coaching staff, man. Like, we talked all week about missing, coordinators, not missing coordinators, but missing assistants. The receiving and tight ends coach, and I thought those guys played well, and they kept themselves in the game, took advantage of Miami's mistakes and miscues, and capitalized when they needed to, and they made Miami work for it, Carlos. But I thought defensively, Corey Heatherman, you could see what happened when he lost some guys to injury there.
Yeah,
especially and the targeting call with Xavier Lucas.
It's hard when you're down 3 DBs at the end.
Yeah, and so I think that's part of the reason why it was so close, and we'll see what happens, going forward here. We know Lucas is going to miss the first half against Indiana, but offensively, the story was Beck, and he didn't make a lot of great throws. He missed guys down the field. He was 1 of 7, I think, on throws 15 yards in the air down the field. But in the intermediate zone on third down, absolutely just a stud.
And that's what wins games. He's finally taken upon himself after that SMU game and really in the playoffs to do what needs to be done to win. He's not forcing the football. That interception, clearly not his fault. It was just a batted ball that they got their hands on. He was throwing the ball in spots that only his receivers can get to, and making the right decisions, which is the most important thing. He was playing within himself and taking what the defense gives him, and he's been doing that all playoffs. And if he continues to do that, there's going to be some opportunities here against Indiana. I'm going to tell you that. We talked about them being a wagon. We'll break down that game in a minute, but that wagon, baby, it's like Oregon Trail. Somebody's going to get dysentery. The wheel is going to fall off. Somebody's going to have to repair that wheel. And do you have enough to overcome that? I don't know, baby. I think that wagon's in trouble.
Hey, what about the fact that, I thought Ole Miss's offensive line did a pretty good job. Granted, he was getting rid of the ball quickly, and there were 4 dropped interceptions. But for the most part, we didn't hear a whole lot from Ruben Bain. We didn't hear a whole lot from Akeem Mesidor. How disparaging is that for you, or do you just give credit to Ole Miss for running the right scheme?
Well, we talked about that's what the scheme was going to do. They were going to go RPO.
Yeah.
They were going to get the ball out quick. They were going to throw quicks underneath. They were trying to eliminate Bain and Mesidor from the game, but they had a ton of pressures. And they forced Trinidad Chambliss out of the pocket to make throws under duress, and he was uncomfortable. And that's what you want. If you can't get the sacks, that's what they did all season. They didn't necessarily have monster numbers, but they made their presence felt. And we talk about it all the time. How do you impact a game if you don't have the ball in your hands or if you aren't getting the stats? You have to do the other things that matter. Stopping the run, setting the edge, getting after the quarterback and making him get rid of the football before he wants to, even though you don't get a sack. That's huge, because then you're leading yourself to stopping a drive. So all those things factored in, and they played, Mesidor injuring his elbow, coming back and playing like a hoss, finishing that game out. All those things are cumulative of what this team's all about. And it doesn't matter about the stat line at this point. It's not about stats anymore. It's about, can you do what you need to do to stop a play, stop a drive, win a game? And they did that.
Overall, when you look at the final numbers, 459 yards of offense for Miami, 268 through the air, 398 for Ole Miss. But really, outside of the Kejuan Lacey run, not an explosive day for their offense. And again, the 10 penalties for 74 yards were huge for Miami in preventing them scoring more points.
The biggest thing was that third down. Look at that third down number.
Yeah, 11-19. On either side. And they were 7 of 14, I think, against Ohio State. So you do the math. Like, that's 18 of 33 in their last 2 games. I mean, it's going to take something like that against Indiana, I think.
Yeah, it will. And I think, getting Ole Miss off the field on third downs, possessing the ball for that long, playing your style of game, even though Ole Miss came into this game, everybody was talking about how Ole Miss was going to tire them with their quick pace and impose their style of game. That quick pace, the problem with that quick pace is if you aren't getting first downs, you're giving up possessions, and your team, especially a team like Miami, will grind you, possess the ball, and continue to take chances away from you. So Ole Miss was going to have a limited amount of opportunities if they weren't going to pick up first downs, and that's what was happening.
All right, we're going to talk about the next challenge for Miami in a second, but let's before we get to the Indiana game because I feel like that's going to take a lot of our conversation. I wanted to take a second to just talk about the transfer portal, Carlos, because a lot of Miami fans are nervous right now. They don't have a quarterback. They look at the situation and say, "Man, what is Mario doing? Why are they being patient?" I talked to some people in Phoenix, certainly with the staff, and my impression was that they don't want to disrupt what's going on in the locker room right now, and it makes sense. You still have football to play, and you're playing in the championship. Before that game, they were playing in the semifinal with a chance to go to the championship. It makes sense to me that you don't take an aggressive approach because there's certain positions where you're very thin right now, either because of injury. Um, you have young guys that you need as backups going into this game. It made sense to me when I heard that explanation. When you hear that explanation, how does it make you feel?
I agree. I think, like we talked about, you're in a situation where this culture has now circled the wagons, for lack of a better term, around each other again. Now they've really come together in a way they've never come together before this point in the season. And you want that feeling to continue, not just through the end of this season into the championship, but moving forward as a program. You want the guys that are on the roster to feel like if a man goes down, I've got an opportunity to step up and be the next man up and get that chance to give them an evaluation of me to see who I truly am. And in a situation in the biggest of stages, right? In the playoff run, here in the national championship game, what am I capable of? And I think that's another reason why I think they have guys out there that they want to see on real live action with the highest of stakes. What do they do? How do they perform? Are they good enough to then keep on the roster, or do we have to go out and get something else? Are we deep enough now to continuously just bring the next guy up from our recruiting cycles? Do we now just plug certain holes, which I think is what they're doing? And in terms of quarterback, I think what this season has shown, especially this playoff run, is you don't need Cam Ward. Cam Ward was needed for that team because they needed to make a splash and they needed an offensive juggernaut because that defense was not good enough to do anything for him. So they needed a guy that was going to keep him in every game, make every throw, and it was a perfect marriage for the time. And I think moving forward, ideally, they don't need a guy that's going to be all world, 50 touchdowns a season, Heisman front runner. They just need a guy that be good, solid, make the right decisions and put the ball in guys' hands,
Yeah.
and let them make plays, especially with a guy like Malachi Tony and other weapons you have on the offense. So I don't necessarily feel bad about them not picking up a quarterback thus far. I don't feel bad about missing out on Sam Levitt or the other guys because I think they feel like, all right, we can probably get somebody in the portal that's not as highly recruited or touted that could do the things that we need them to do to execute this offense in a way that'll get us to the point to where we are again. And that's what I think the thinking is right now. Don't blow $6 million on a guy like a Ty Simpson, although he might be a great fit here, who's injured, who's maybe not 100%, who you don't know what that status is going to be like, and disrupt the chemistry you have in the locker room. If you're going to go out and get a guy, I think you will go out and get a guy now at this point at quarterback that'll compete. Not a guy that's maybe slotted in as an automatic starter, a guy that's maybe the favorite. But if the other guys can beat him, you're like, all right, we didn't pay this guy $6 million. We could put him on the bench if we need to, and let him fight it out.
Yeah, I think, part of this too, though, again, has to do with the stage that you're at in the playoffs, right? And a lot of these young guys, like, they're paying attention to what Miami's doing. There's certain positions that Miami has addressed here that you knew they were going to have to add stuff through the transfer portal, right? Like, you knew those were positions where you're losing seniors, you're losing guys that are going to the NFL. And before we
And portal
continue,
guys.
yeah, here's the outgoing transfers. As you can see, none of them are starters for Miami. These are the 7 guys out of the 8 that have already landed somewhere. Markeith Williams is the safety, still doesn't have a school, but these are the others and where they've ended up. Night Carr to Wake Forest. Donta Simpson is kind of the one that hurts, goes to Missouri. Chance Robinson going to NC State, and then the one that's the mystery here, Carlos, is Brock Schott going to Indiana. A lot of Miami fans with the eyebrows raised, especially with some of these reports and stories about Indiana cheating. And look, this is the business now, brother. You know how it works in the NFL. Guys get cut. and suddenly they get picked up by somebody they're playing the next week.
Yep.
And those coaches take advantage of it. And if Miami could, I bet you they do the same. So be interesting to see what kind of effect Brock Shot has. But again, nobody of value. All of these positions are deep in terms of guys that are available to play. Miami has guys that if they had injuries, losing these dudes is not going to kill them. And then you look at what they've added, the four positions that they've added. I got the graphic here. I just got to get to it. I apologize. Portal additions. There's four guys that they've added that'll be a part of the team next year. Vandrevius Jacobs, Omar Thornton, the safety from Boston College, Cam Vaughn, who was at Jacksonville State, transferred to West Virginia this year. All three of those guys are full-time starters. Jarquez Carter is a big defensive lineman that Miami was recruiting. Previously didn't get him, went to Ohio State, spent a year there, and now he's on his way to Miami. So those are the only four additions to this point. But my bigger point again, Carlos, is I think it was smart for Mario. Look, you would have loved to have gotten a quarterback, but what happens now if, God forbid, something happens to Carson Beck, right? And Emory Williams has to go into the game. You're playing for a championship. You sign that other quarterback. What happens to Emory Williams in that game? Where's his headspace at, right? Do you all of a sudden lose your backup going into the national championship game? I don't know. I mean, I think had Miami been able to sign a quarterback, they probably would have done it. But I also think there's a different level of enthusiasm in going after that quarterback, a different level of desperation in getting that quarterback when you've already been eliminated. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like I said, if they are going to get a quarterback here at some point, I think it should be a guy now at this point. It's going to have to be a guy that's less touted, a guy that you might want to come in there and develop a little bit and bring in and compete with the other guys. Not a guy that's slotted automatically as a starter, maybe a front runner as a starter, but a guy that the others will say, okay, maybe I have a shot at beating this guy out. You see all these guys that are left, and they're talking about this kid from USC maybe as an option.
We're saying Longstreet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Size wise, I don't know. I think you've got enough. I think for that, you maybe look Darian Coleman on the roster, Luke Nickel. You give them a shot. You give Emory a shot. Again, the guy that I keep looking at is Aiden Childs. That guy, to me, he's raw. Nobody's picked him up yet. He's athletic as shit.
He's committed. He's committed to Northwestern.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. There goes my freaking little pea shooter out in the air. But I was going to say, he actually played well against Indiana, had a 64-yard run against them. He's an electric player. But at this point, I think you probably go into the season with the guys you have. And what you do is you build around them. You build enough of a roster around them to where you don't need them to necessarily be world beaters, but be good enough to manage the game, not make mistakes, and make plays when they need to, and just get the ball in the hands of the playmakers. And I think that's what they've done here. They've added a couple of receivers they feel are playmakers. They lost a couple of receivers in the portal. That's basically substituting for those guys. You got a guy in Omar Thornton who could play safety there, and maybe you could roll down Bryce Fitzgerald into a nickel role like you did with Keontae Scott, or maybe he becomes that Keontae Scott kind of guy. Jarquez Carter, again, replacing Dante Simpson. So it's essentially what you are doing, and what you've done here is replace guys that have gone out in the portal with other guys coming in the portal, and that'll be in the mix, not necessarily guys you're saying, okay, they're taking my job.
Yeah. I agree. And again, there's plenty of time. You have until January 16th, which is this Friday, to enter the portal. Ty Simpson, I know, signed the paperwork to enter the NFL draft, the former Alabama quarterback. I know Miami was interested in Simpson. Whether or not he decides to pull his name out of the draft is a different story. We'll see if that happens. It obviously happened with Carson Beck and Cam Ward. So maybe history repeats itself yet again, and he's the quarterback. But right now, I think the focus is totally on winning the championship this year, and you can't blame Mario for that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think he feels very confident with his roster, not just disrupting things now in the playoff, but also he must feel confident with the guys he's got in that locker room from what he's seen since the SMU game to say, we've got guys in this in-house so we know we can step up and take over.
There's nothing wrong with that. You have recruited well
the
last
few
years. Yeah. I mean, and look, if it ends up being Longstreet, It's a talented quarterback. You bring him in here, you see what happens. You let it play out, right? You let the best man
Yeah,
win.
and that's the
And
situation again. He's going to have to compete. He's not slotted as automatically QB1.
right, right. And let's imagine that Mario has built a roster here that can still win the ACC. Next year. I would think that they can, even without knowing what the quarterback situation is. Knowing how they've recruited on the offensive and defensive lines, and just how important that has been week in and week out. So I think it's a good enough team as is without the quarterback to win the conference. And if you do that, you're going to make the playoffs. So anyway, I think it'll be very, very interesting. Let's take a look here at the Miami Indiana matchup and start breaking that down here, Carlos, before we get to our mailbag. Here's the first look at the Miami offensive rankings versus the Indiana defensive rankings. You can see Indiana's top 10 in yards per play, rushing yards per game, absolutely a wagon there in terms of stopping teams that can run the football, including Oregon, who obviously was banged up, didn't have everybody that they.
Yeah, they were down to their fifth running back. Let's chill with
Yeah,
that.
but they did do well during the regular season against the Ducks in terms of slowing them down. Top 10 in yards per rush attempt. Um, Pretty solid defense. Overall, Carlos. Miami, as an offense, had its best game, obviously, in the last bowl game. We're going to talk about these matchups here in a second. I just wanted to kind of show you some of the numbers here as we rotate through. You'll see the Miami defense here versus Indiana's offense and some of the rankings. Hurricanes 16th in yards per play, Indiana 7th in yards per play for offense, and then you just look at top 5 scoring defense versus top 2 scoring offense. Right off the bat, looking at some of these numbers, Carlos, what is the first thing that opens your eyes or makes you think about this matchup?
Well, I can tell you what opened my eyes about Indiana's defense. They've given up 100 yards rushing in a game twice this year.
Yeah.
Old Dominion and Penn State. And Old Dominion, they gave first game of the season, and they had a quarterback that was basically doing it all. That's now at Wisconsin. But it's going to open. It to me, the key to this game is on both sides of the ball, who runs the ball better. And I
Yep.
know that this has been said
I'm with
before,
you.
but
I'm with you 100%.
Indiana's whole game is based on running the football, controlling the line of scrimmage, and then letting Mendoza play off of that to make teams load the box and then throw those back shoulder throws, get guys open down the field like Charlie Becker, Surratt, use those guys off of the action, use those guys in situations now where the defense is loading up and get them one-on-one matchups so that they can make plays. Again, they've given up 2 100-yard rushing games this season, right? That to me is incredibly impressive. I'll give you the numbers right now for some games
this is Indiana's rushing offense. Let's start with that, Carlos, because they've got 2 backs that are pretty effective.
A 1,000-yard rusher and another one that was almost a 1,000-yard rusher.
Yeah, the Black who I think was there last year, and then Hemby who came over from Maryland. But you're right. I think for Miami, run defense imperative, right? Look at the games that were close for them. Iowa, 2.67 yards a carry. Oregon the following week, 3 yards, barely over 100 yards. Penn State, 108 yards rushing against them. Wisconsin, obviously a terrible team offensively, but that wasn't like they just ran all over them, right? 83 yards, quite literally. And then Ohio State did a pretty good job against them in the Big Ten championship. So that is 100% how you stay with Indiana. If you're giving up a lot of big runs, and Miami gave up a big run on a bad run fit here against Ole Miss, you do that, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, they've got to be solid in their gaps. They've got to tackle. They've got to get guys down and make Indiana play third and long, like we've been talking about. Not only is their running game their driving force, but Mendoza holds the ball a little bit longer than Trinidad Chambliss. On average, I believe, let me take a look here. I believe his average time to hold the ball, time to throw, is 2.72 overall, 2.46 on actual pass attempts. When he's been sacked, he's holding the ball 3.78 seconds, which is a hell of a lot of time. That gives plenty of time for these guys to come up there and make a play on him. And he's mobile, he's fast, he can move, but he's not elusive like Trinidad Chambliss. I think he's a guy that's more straight line speed than he is quick and jukey to be able to make guys miss. He's a big, tall guy. He's strong, but I think you can get him down if you get in the pocket and collapse it. The thing for Miami is they've got to hold them under 100 yards rushing, under 3.5 yards an attempt. under 100 yards. If you can get him to 100, just under 100, under 3.5 yards an attempt, I think you're winning that game. And on the opposite side, I think if Miami runs for 120, goes over 100, runs for 120, just over 3.5, close to four yards a carry, you're winning that game. Like you talked about with Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, the Ohio State game, the two Oregon games. I'm going to give you some numbers. So going into these games on the season, all these teams, Iowa, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and Bama, they averaged 4.53 yards per carry on a normal basis.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana held those teams to 2.73 yards a carry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Those were tight. Those were the couple tight games they had in the regular season, and then of course the 2 playoff blowouts. And they were averaging 3.59 yards a carry in those games. Against Oregon, the first time around, it was 3 yards a carry. Against Iowa, it was 2.67 yards a carry. Against Ohio State, it was 3.47 yards a carry. So again, if you're under 3.5 yards a carry, you should be able to control this offense and force them to just get out of their comfort zone and throw the ball more than they want to. I know Mendoza's a great quarterback. He's incredibly accurate, Heisman Trophy winner. But if he has to do more than he's used to, if you get him uncomfortable, that's where you lead guys to make mistakes. So that to me is the key there.
Agreed. And I think you got to disrupt them. You can't just chase them all night. They do a good job. Their offensive line, we'll take a look at their size battle here a little bit in a second. But I think getting your hands up, deflecting passes, just doing things that he's not used to facing is probably, Corey Heatherman's got to be creative in some capacity here. Not that he isn't or doesn't try to be. I just think they have to throw some wrinkles at Mendoza to just present a way for him to hold on to the ball a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I think, Miami, from what I've read, and then obviously you've seen it on game after game, Miami loves 5-man pressures, specifically bringing the nickel with Keontae Scott. They brought some more A-gap pressures recently with the linebackers. They have to mix that up a little bit because I think Indiana's game plan coming into here offensively is they're going to try and eliminate the blitz from Keontae Scott. They're going to try and put him in situations where he can't come off the edge, or they have him blocked in a way that they set up their front. They like to use 2 tight ends, and we talked about it earlier in the year. If I was a team playing Miami and I had 2 tight ends that I trusted, I'd go out there with 2 tight ends and widen the surface area and create bigger gaps for the defense to have to control wider gaps and get those edge guys a little bit further out, and then have the ability to go, 2-on-1 on a Mesidor and a Bain with a tight end and a tackle, or a tackle and a back, or tight end in the back, just giving yourself an opportunity to get enough time back there to get your receivers open and throw the ball down the field. So I think that's what they're going to do. They also love to throw the ball man-to-man when they see that, and those back shoulder throws, that's their bread and butter. They also do a great job of identifying coverages and getting the ball to the open guy. So Miami needs to be able to mix their coverages and disguise it in ways that confuses Mendoza a little bit. So, if you're going to be running cover 2, you invert that cover 2. Instead of running the safeties back to the halves, you run them down, and then you get those corners back as you're too deep. You drop an edge here and there. And that's really going to be the key there for Miami. Can they mix the looks up on defense along with what they do well to give them enough to think about where Indiana's uncomfortable? And then ultimately, once you get in that 3rd and long, is you let those dogs eat.
Well, you look at the matchup here, size-wise. This is a big offensive line for Indiana. Those boys are athletic, 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", 6'5", 6'6". Nobody under 309.
And you know what? How athletic they are. That damn center, Pat Coogan, he pulls a whole lot, and he gets on the edge. And that dude he's a DB hunter. So that's the other thing the Hurricanes have to be prepared for. If they're getting on the edge and their DBs are coming up to run fit, they've got to do a good job of staying outside, setting that edge on the outside, letting help come, and then be physical at the point of attack to take those blocks on, and then get some guys down as soon as they make contact.
You look at the experience factor, 20 starts minimum for their left guard. That's the least amount of starts and snaps. Drew Evans, the former walk-on. You look at Miami, obviously Justin Scott, super talented, former 5-star, top 10 player overall. 8 starts. He basically took over for David Blay midway through the season. It's been him and Ahmad Moten. Moten only played 18 snaps this game. Came back from the injury that sidelined him on the opening series. Mario said, this week he's full throttle in practice, and they're expecting him to play. And this is the time of year where you tough it out, right?
The window, baby.
Yeah, everything. But look, you look at the tail of the tape. That's a legitimate offensive line, Carlos, and kudos to their staff. We showed you earlier the rushing numbers and just how good they really really are. I wanted to flip the script because everybody's focusing on Miami and like just the advantage that they have on that side, and I wanted to put that graphic up for you. 1 second here, Carlos. I apologize, and I think I've got the right one now. Is this the right one? There it is. There's our boy Markel Bell and
The
their
mountain.
excellent edge rusher Mikhail Kamara. When you look at these numbers, Carlos, what do you see?
Listen, I see a tail of the tape that really isn't indicative of what Indiana does. Indiana's not what Miami is on that defensive line. They don't do what Miami does. Miami comes at you with their front four and tries to get pressure with that front four and attacks you with it because they feel like they have the two best defensive ends in the country and two solid defensive tackles that can lock you up and make plays. Indiana doesn't necessarily do that. Indiana leads the country in what's called simulated pressures. What simulated pressures are is they'll show a guy coming. That guy may come, but then drop ends out or they'll drop a tackle out and they'll bring four and not bring five. And they'll do it with a mix of players that they're using. The other thing that Indiana does up front, when you're undersized, you got to use your quickness to your advantage, right? So what does Indiana do? They stunt a lot, they slant, they move that defensive line, and that's advantageous to them because you're not blocking a full man when you're slanting and stunting a lot of times. They're disrupting your blocking angles. And that's what we were talking about earlier with this Miami run game. It wasn't just like it was at the beginning of the season. If this was a Miami team at the beginning of the season that was just trying to line up and out muscle teams, I'd be concerned. But this team has now learned how to use angles and how to get themselves in better blocking position to be able to use their double teams to get to that second level and open up holes for Mark Fletcher and the running backs. So what they have to do in this game is stay disciplined in their run rules, identify those slants, those stunts, that movement, and be able to still get those double teams off and get to that second level. And I think they can do that based on the way they've been doing things recently. Like I said, with that tight bunch, it gives Indiana more gaps to cover. Miami has to be prepared also in the passing game to feel those simulated pressures out, understand that there's going to be guys dropping out. I think Indiana's going to run a lot of drop 8 in this game, or some drop 8, I think, because Carson Beck has faced that throughout the playoffs. Teams have decided they want to drop 8 on third and long sometimes because they feel like they can confuse him. So far, he's done a good job with it, but Indiana does a really good job of that. Indiana runs zone coverage about 90% of the time on defense. They are a straight zone team, and they mix their zones very well. They disguise their zones very well. So for Miami, it's got to be a situation of, can we run stuff that we feel comfortable going in our progressions and understanding that we know what the coverage may be pre-snap, but we know it's going to change post-snap, and can we understand where guys are going to be on the field to be able to make sure we don't make mistakes with the football?
Will be a fascinating matchup on Monday. Right now, 8.5-point spread for the Hoosiers. I think a lot of that is predicated on the fact that Miami played as poorly as they did in the Verbal Fiesta Bowl, and the fact that Indiana absolutely crushed Oregon. They were up 35-7 at the half, took advantage of lots of turnovers.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. I think my man Dante Moore got greased before the game, right? I think there was a little bit of Vegas going on there because my man threw a straight pick six to a dude that was standing right there. That fumble with the running back, okay, I'll let that go because the back was a fifth-string back. He ran into the ball. The other fumble, I don't know, man. My man Dante Moore was playing softer than Sharman in that game, baby. I don't know what was going on there. And it's very easy. I mean, give credit to Indiana. They stomped Oregon, but they had the advantage of playing from a short field most of the game because of these turnovers and the way they were stopping Oregon's offense early in the game. Oregon came back from that pick six and ran it down the field on them on a 14-play drive and got it to 7-7, but they just couldn't get out of their own way. And people were talking about, how much of a juggernaut this Indiana team is coming into this game. They played against an Alabama team that doesn't run the football, that couldn't protect their quarterback against anybody. Okay. They played against an Oregon team that was down to their fifth-string running back, and their quarterback was obviously bought. I don't understand what was going on there. So when they talk about Drago, Indiana being Drago, we're fighting Drago. You know who Drago fought to get his reputation? A retired Apollo Creed. Okay, he killed a retired Apollo Creed. He didn't go out there and fight nobody at the top of their game, baby. They didn't go in
Right.
there and fight the real Rocky. Once he fought real Rocky on the juice, Rocky took him down in Moscow, and that's what's going to happen.
I know you want to get to the prediction part of this already because you're fired up. I can see it. I can see it in your blood, in your blood
What I do
pressure
want to
there.
give you, though, what I do want to give you is some ideas for Shannon Dawson. Okay.
All right, let's hear it.
Shannon, you've been listening now over the last few weeks, and I appreciate that because I know you're a podcast fan. You talk shit about me when the A gap thing came out. You directed your comments directly at me. You didn't say my name, but I know you were talking about me. And I appreciate it. So what they're going to have to do now in this game is they're going to have to break tendency a little bit. Indiana's incredibly good at studying teams, whether it's by cheating or not, studying teams and understanding what they like to do on offense, right?
Right.
So the way you break tendency is everybody, again, has been talking about this false pull tunnel screen. Indiana's going to be ready for that. You have to have something ready to show that tunnel screen, but give them something else, whether it's actually pumping the tunnel and handing the back on a delay and following that pull, or throwing an RPO behind it, or doing something else to make Indiana not just attack that tunnel screen and have to sit and play, read and react, right?
Right.
The other thing they're going to have to do is they're going to have to use motion out of that tight bunch to try and what's called pull the string, and that means pull the string of linebackers along the line to make them shift out of their gaps and then create better run angles for themselves, which they've done a little bit. Something they haven't done yet out of that tight bunch, which NFL teams love to do, specifically the Rams and the 49ers, is they'll run a toss weak to that out of that tight bunch because it gives them an advantage on the edge, or they'll run it to the bunch side so they could seal everything down and bring a pull around that also. So I think a toss out of that tight bunch would be nice too. I think they're going to have to go with some more mid zone, which is basically B gap zone a little bit to get out of tendency, because I think at the end it's going to be slanting and stunning to the A gaps to try and shut that down and get a better angle to try and stuff that inside run.
So you're saying ditch the A gap, go with the B gap.
What I'm saying is incorporate it. You know, like in Boomerang when my man came out with the jacket and he was like, you got to incorporate. It's coordinate. It's all coordinate. You got to coordinate, right? He's got the mushrooms on the inside, baby. It matches the shoes too. You got to coordinate, right? You got to not just grab bag things. You could do what you do well, but you have to have something off that, a counter to it, to make them think a little bit. So they're going to run their inside zone. They're going to run that duo. They've got to run some what's called split zone duo too. So out of that tight bunch, a split zone is basically the offensive line is blocking one way, and you're usually running a tight end off the line of scrimmage across the formation and blocking that end on the backside to give you a cutback run and to also seal that off so the end doesn't come down crashing. I think they're going to have to do that out of that tight bunch, that inside man off the tight bunch, run across, do a little split zone, and get some action out of that too.
Ladies and gentlemen, your future offensive coordinator, Carlos Ledo.
I just like pulling the strings from the back. I just like being the puppeteer. I like being Shannon Dawson and being Shannon Dawson's ear.
I had Shannon Dawson by myself for about 10 minutes after the game was over.
How much shit did he talk about me?
He didn't mention you once.
Of course he did.
But he did talk to me about his play calling and specifically the last play of the game for Miami offensively, which led to the Carson Beck touchdown. I was very surprised to learn that they had not run that play yet all season. And considering we're about 1,000 plays in, to the season, offensive snaps, and they ran 88 against Ole Miss, that they still had something fresh to throw at them. And the reason the play worked is because they pulled the Ole Miss defense to the right side of the field. They were in man coverage, as you astutely pointed out in our post-game conversation. And Carson Beck did the right thing. He didn't force the ball. Yeah. And I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was well done. And
what a moment for that guy. What a moment for Carson Beck. Maligned. They shit on him in Georgia. They didn't believe in him. They thought after the injury he was all done. Comes here, has these rough moments against SMU and against Louisville, and just keeps grinding and changes his game essentially to be that kind of guy that just makes the right play, and he tucks that ball and runs. And I think that's going to be another huge thing. His ability to run and pick up yardage for the Hurricanes throughout the playoffs with his legs has been instrumental to keeping drives alive. And I think that's one of the things you could do against Indiana. If you're a guy that can run and get out of the pocket, you might be able to pick up some yards. So again, Carson Beck with his legs should be able to get some yardage and keep drives alive. Now, Shannon Dawson called a good game for the most part. The only two complaints to me were that Malikat 3rd and 3 down near the goal line. I get that. I love the Malikat, but I don't think that's situationally, that's not the right play. I think in that instance where you're just having them eating their lunch and just bulldozing them. I think giving that ball to Mark Fletcher or Marty Brown, running something that you're comfortable with, that you've been using all series, grinding them down, picking up that first down and keeping it going would have been better. And to me, the flea flicker was unnecessary. He likes to grab back a little bit and do a little bit of the trickeration here in the playoffs. He did it a lot against Texas A&M. Thank God he cut it down a little bit. I think you just got to trust your guys, man. Trust your guys and go out there and do it. If you're going to run a trick play, it has to be a situation where it's not going to kill a drive. Do it on a 1st and 10. Get it against a base look and make them react to it.
I've had the graphic up here of the Hoosier turnover margin for a little while, and in case you've been reading it while Carlos and I have been talking, you will notice that there is only one game where Indiana has turned it over more than once, and they still won 56-6. So not a lot of mistakes from this team. 8 on the season. They've capitalized on a lot of turnovers. You see the 29 turnovers gained. So needless to say, Miami has to play a clean football game here to have success against the Hoosiers.
And I'll give you another little stat. In these
Go ahead.
games that I highlighted: Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Alabama, and Oregon the second time.
Mhm.
Through all those games, they were only +3 in turnover margin. They got 3 turnovers against Oregon in that last game, so they were basically even through those games, and it gave people a shot,
Right.
except for Alabama.
Well, when you can't run the football.
That's the difference, and that's the thing that Indiana hasn't faced yet. They have not faced a team all season other than Old Dominion who was run focused, who their identity was, we're going to pound the ball at you. We're going to try and run the ball at you. You're going to have to try and stop us up front, and we're going to grind you until you say no, until you stop us, and then we have to do something else. They haven't faced that all year, and they haven't faced a defensive line like this. We keep saying it. This is now, we could say with confidence, the best defensive line in the country.
We'll get to our predictions here in a second, Carlos, but I know for a fact this is happening for sure. You are not going to the game. You are not going to be spending a fortune on tickets. Tickets are going for over $3,500, and those are in the nosebleeds on the secondary market. This article here is from the 1983 Orange Bowl. And I was curious because I really wanted to see, how much the tickets cost to that game to compare it to this one. And if you see this little clip from the Miami Herald, tickets for the Orange Bowl in 1983 were selling for $20. As it says here, the hottest commodity this side of the Cabbage Patch doll. The resale value right before kickoff, it was hit hard. Scalpers were not doing well, Carlos. Some of them were making $7 a ticket, $10 a ticket. Before we continue and get to the mailbag and discuss some other things, when you read that and you see the prices of tickets and you think about the struggle for so many Hurricanes fans, are you going to blame any of them if they sell their tickets to an Indiana fan who might be paying upwards of $20,000 to $25,000 for their ticket?
No. Listen, I love my team, but at some point you got to make a business decision. You know what I'm saying? If somebody's gonna offer me $25,000 per ticket, I get $50,000 and I'm out the door, son. I'm watching it at home and I'm saving my money because I ain't paying $20 a beer on top of that, right? I'm sitting at the crib and I'll get those Walmart ultra fake Michelob Ultras that it's like $12 a 24 pack. I'll run up the score on those. But the funny thing is, I think this team is most like that 83 team of all the championship teams. If you're going to compare it to one team, it's that 83 team, the team that was dead in the water, that didn't seem like they were going to have a chance and found themselves, miraculously in the championship game against a team that's a juggernaut, that's supposed to be an all-timer with Tom Osborne, the rough and tough coach that's got his team so disciplined and don't make mistakes and have throttled everybody. And the lowly Miami Hurricanes ended up pulling it out. And it's crazy.
Miami was an 11-point underdog in 83 against a Midwest team dressed in red. You and I have discussed how every team that they've played in the championship, that they won against anyway, was red and white uniforms. Nebraska, check. Oklahoma, check. Who else? Alabama, yeah. That crimson red. 91.
And 91 was Nebraska.
And then the last one was Nebraska. Yeah. So, that's a winning formula for Miami, although they did end the Fiesta Bowl curse. So maybe it flips this year, Carlos. I don't know. Give me your prediction. What's going to happen and why before we get to the mailbag?
So I think the Hurricanes are going to come out. They're going to run the ball. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
try. This is going to be honestly one of the most physical football games you will ever see in modern day because they play old school. Both teams. They are going to knuckle it up and play Mario's brand of football. This is what he likes. He likes to get in a phone booth and fight you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
both teams' styles have been validated getting to this point when you've analyzed who they've beaten and what they've done to get here. I think we've talked about styles being part of the situation that makes teams pull it out or be able to find a way to win. I think this is the most physical team Indiana's played all season. I don't think Indiana's played a team like this. I think matchup wise, it's a bad matchup for Indiana because they've been playing a lot of teams that like to spread it out, throw the ball over the field, that aren't run focused, that aren't necessarily as physical as they are. So they dominate, they impose their will. How do they react when they start getting punched in the mouth and punched in the mouth hard by a team that's
Mm-hmm.
really physical? So I think matchup wise, this is the better. If Oregon had made it the championship game, I think who they had been during the regular season, it would have been more concerning to me because I think this style plays in Miami's hands because this is what they do. This is what they practice against every day. This is what they see. This is who they want to be. They're basically looking in a mirror and fighting themselves in this game, but I think they do it a little bit better than Indiana. Indiana, to me, is more disciplined. They're more sound in terms of how they operate. They're more sound in terms of their game planning and how they execute. But this Miami team is built for this kind of game. So had they played a more wide open offense like Ole Miss, I think Indiana would have stomped them too. But I think coming into a game like this with Miami, everything on the line, being in a boxing match, this is Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns, right? The Motor City
Mm-hmm.
Cobra. This is one of those fights, those old school boxing matches from the 80s where guys would just go to war for 15 rounds and try to kill each other. I think this is what that's going to be. I think the Hurricanes come out on top. They rush for 120. They get the win. I said 200 last week, and they get the win. They got 191. We were close. I said 150 against Ohio State. They got that. They got the win. They get 120, 125 in this game. No turnovers. They win this game 20-17.
20-17. That would be quite a performance, limiting the Indiana offense and controlling the clock. Carlos, I honestly don't know which way to go right now because I'm worried about the health of this team. I'm worried about Xavier Lucas missing the first half of this game because of the targeting call. I'm worried about the health of OJ Frederick, even though he's supposedly back and practicing, and Damari Brown. There's a lot of questions for me, and especially on the defensive side of the ball. Right, coming off of this performance, I think you look at Fernando Mendoza's numbers. He's played at an elite level for a long time this season. Has not really been roughed up. Um, Teams haven't been able to really get to him as often as they'd like. The running game has been super effective. Everything in my body is telling me that Indiana's just going to win this game because Miami's going to self-destruct and they're just banged up, right? They played through the flu. They've physically been beat up. Like they've had the much tougher road to get here. But then I think to myself, they're at home. They're in their own building.
The cafeteria
Mario's been building for this for 4 years. What?
is going to be hot because it's right there. They don't have to bring it with them from somewhere else. They got the cafecito right there. They could call a carreta and feed it in between quarters, baby.
I think Miami does it. I think they find a way to disrupt Fernando Mendoza in ways that he has not been disrupted. And you know what convinced me of that, Carlos? There was a play in the second half where Fernando took off and ran against Oregon. And he didn't just run. He ran 1,000 miles an hour. Like he was full throttle, reckless, spins, fumbles, loses the ball. And I thought to myself, nobody smacked this guy in the mouth all season. Nobody has laid a finger on this guy.
It's going to happen on Monday.
What's going to happen when somebody runs into him full speed? What's going to happen when Roman Hemby finally feels some physical violence? What's going to happen when Indiana's defensive line has somebody jamming their fingers in their face and pushing them backwards with violence? I haven't seen it yet. Nobody's done it. So it's hard for me to tell you what that is. But I think Miami's going to be highly motivated in this game. I think being at home, having more Indiana fans in the building, because that's what's going to happen, Carlos. You and I know it. Indiana's got a bigger alumni base. They've got more guys with money. Mark Cuban, right? The Mr. Cuban against all the Cubans, right? Like, what's going to happen?
The fake Cuban will be in the stands.
Right.
Or in the suite.
So I think Miami will rise to the occasion. And I don't think they're just going to win by a little bit.
Oh.
I think they're going to win this game by 2 touchdowns.
Look at this. Listen, and the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day. Look who's coming in with a blowout prediction. Have you been talking to Kelvin?
I have not, and I'm not going to tell Kelvin this because he wants me to be negative Nancy. I have a role to play for him and all the Miami fans. I'm supposed to be the Florida State fan, as Mike Ryan said. He said, never in a million years would you catch me wearing an FSU hat. Yet that is what I'm known for publicly. Everybody thinks I'm the FSU guy.
Mike is correct.
I think Miami wins this game 31-17.
I like it. You know, there's something else about this team and the way each team has gotten to this final. Miami's battle tested, right? You talk about, we'll keep using that Rocky analogy. They had to beat Apollo in his prime, right? They had to beat Clubber Lang. They even had to beat Hot Lips, right? Hot Lips Hulk Hogan in the exhibition match to get here to fight Drago. And even in the Rocky movies, right? We're talking about Clubber Lang. Rocky was giving all these softies while he was building up his championship, and he lost his edge. Indiana's run into 2 teams that weren't really at full throttle, right? They ran into an Alabama team that probably shouldn't have been in the playoffs, right? That had gotten smoked previously by Georgia in the SEC championship game. They ran into an injured Oregon team whose quarterback was clearly bought off. And they were on their 5th string running back. They were pulling
not letting that go.
They're pulling GAs on and putting pads on them and putting back there to pass protect, which is another thing that I think is going to be huge for Miami. Is their running backs are great at pass protection, specifically Mark Fletcher and even Marty Brown. They're good pass protecting backs, which really short circuits what Indiana tries to do up front with their simulated pressures and everything they're doing. They attack those running backs and put them in positions to try and play one-on-one against a backer or an edge player that really they can't handle, but Miami can handle that. So when you're talking about a team that's been through it, that's been through the gauntlet, that's been punched in the mouth all playoffs and has responded, Miami's the team. Indiana's been sitting pretty. They haven't been punched in the mouth yet in this playoff, but get ready, baby, because it's coming.
All right, those are our predictions. It's time for the mailbag, Carlos. We have a lot that people want to talk about,
and they can't lose because I got the championship Dolphins hat on, white and smooth with the old logo, the real logo, not the beached whale. We're good to go.
All right, let's see what questions we have here from the audience, Carlos. There's a lot. We'll start with Carlos Moore, CMO later. That's his name. Dawson's inability to read a game concerns me. Everyone who watched the Ole Miss matchup was asking themselves, why are we not running the ball more? Is he about to cost us a natty?
My concern during the season was that he would. But I think what he's shown in the playoffs is he's adapted. He's grown. I think game to game, I think he's grown. I think his game plan has been good enough to get what they need to be able to execute and win and not put them in bad positions. And I think he's going to do that. I think you saw against Ole Miss, especially in that 4th quarter, they were dialing things up to get explosives. They picked the right opportunities. They ran things when they needed to. If he could just stop the dumb shit, every once in a while, every other series pulling out something stupid, this team can really make some noise on offense.
I think he's going to be more conservative in this game the way that he was against Ohio State because he realizes how Indiana has won. And I showed you guys the turnover margin earlier. As much as they trusted Carson Beck to beat Ole Miss and put the ball in his hands to win that game, I also think we saw him already once in these playoffs have Carson protect the football and make that a priority. And I think physically in this game where Miami is going to win is at the line of scrimmage. I think this is going to be a showcase game for Francis Mauigoa and Inez Cooper. I think a bevy of backs are going to have success against Indiana, and that's why I think they're going to win the game because they're going to control the clock like they did last
Unlike
week.
Indiana needs Mendoza to be on to win this game. Mendoza needs to play like he played against Oregon, like he's been playing the playoff
Mhm.
throughout the season. He needs to be on for them to win this game. Carson Beck doesn't need to be Fernando Mendoza at that level for this team to win. He just needs to be the guy that doesn't make mistakes, keeps drives alive, and puts the ball in the guy's hands at the right time.
All right. Benito Del Monte, Benny Boo on Twitter says, when will Carlos buy his Walter Mercado robe? Do you have
Benny, you
any
know it's in the
response?
closet, baby, but I can't break the uniform going into the championship game. Okay? Once the championship is over, then you're gonna see me in them sparkles coming out there with the with the whip of the robe saying amor, mucho mucho amor.
Armando Izaguirre, our buddy AY2 Mondo says, a lot of fans are worried about quarterback next year. Explain why we should trust Mario considering we are playing for the national championship this week. I think Carlos said it well earlier regarding the offensive line and the fact that this team is winning without having to rely on their quarterback. There was an era, some of you might remember that are old enough to remember, gray beards like ourselves here, Carlos, when Miami used to run the ball down everybody's throats and they didn't throw it a whole lot. You might remember that 91 team with Gino Torretta throwing it all over the field. But there were plenty of other teams that ran the
Well,
football.
even then, he didn't throw it all over the field like we're used to today. They ran the shit out of the ball in a one
Mhm.
back set, and they really grinded teams.
Right. They did. And, 2001, what were they known for? Willis McGahee and
Well,
Clinton
Clinton
Portis.
Portis.
Yeah. Like they could run the ball. All right. Asher Wildman, our friend from Spectrum News. As always, you guys nailed it. When you see a UM player transfer to Indiana during a title run, is this something to worry about? Does Miami need to change things in a week? Now, I know now what Mario referenced at the Fiesta Bowl press conference. Is this a legit concern or overplayed? Look, we just saw what happened with Michigan, right? How they cheated their way to a championship and the Connor Stallions and sign stealing and all the things that they were accused of. We've seen it in the NFL, right? Deflategate, the Patriots. Uh, Teams are looking for an edge in all ways, shape, or forms. And the fact that they just signed a guy who was a part of your offensive room for the whole season up until the Verbo Fiesta Bowl, yeah, you should be a little worried because that guy is going to provide intel to his new staff. That's just the way it is. But I also think you need to realize that Mario is super worried about all that kind of stuff, and they should be prepared to counter that.
So here's what I'll say about that. There is enough film at this point. Now you're in the championship game, right? You're going into game 16 that Indiana has that they know Miami's offense. They know what they run. They know their tendencies.
Yeah.
They've got enough tape that they have enough data that they don't need somebody to come over and tell them what Miami's done throughout the season or what they do. They know what Miami does. To me, more importantly, would be if a guy's coming like midweek and knows the game plan and feeds that to the team. That's different because game plan is team specific, game specific, how you're going to use what you have and what you run against that specific team's defense. He has no fucking clue what that's going to be like. The other thing is the one thing he could maybe give them is, all right, audibles. Like when Beck is checking, when he says this is what they're doing. That's a simple change. They can rep that in practice. And also remember, because we're in this era of radios in the quarterback's helmet, most of those play calls, Miami's a huddle team. They're not a pace team. Those calls are coming into the helmet anyway. So yeah, they're gonna know tendency. They're gonna know those things. They're gonna know that from film study anyway. The only thing they might be able to pick up is audible calls, which they can kill and they could change.
Tony Perez, the Big Chilean 63 on Twitter says, as far as you know, are there any truth to the IU cheating allegations? No, as far as I know, there isn't. And I privy to a Slack channel at the Athletic with a bunch of other national college football writers. This was a topic of discussion in our Slack channel. And there's nothing I can tell you so far that we've gathered that makes me feel like this is real. Does that mean it didn't happen? No. I mean, the Connor Stallion stuff, right? We didn't find out about that for a couple years, right? I mean, it was ongoing there for a while. So you never know when that stuff will surface. But I think initially, I can tell you with some certainty that nobody's sounding the alarm at the Athletic, and maybe it's different at ESPN or some other places. But right now, no.
And I can tell you this, just to be safe, I know what the next investment is going to be by Mario and the football staff.
What's that?
A big ass server room where they keep everything on hard drives and they eliminate the cloud. Put shit
Well,
on paper.
everybody's saying because Mark Cuban, I guess, his technology and so forth, what he owns can have
Yeah,
access to
because
some of the
UM
stuff.
has never put out anybody that has a tech background.
Yeah, well, that's true. Um, this is from Coach Jason Bond. Who was the last team with a dominant offensive line to lose in the title game? Well, um, who did Ohio State beat last year? Let's go back to
Notre
to
Dame.
that game. Notre Dame. Notre Dame had a pretty good offensive
Yeah,
line.
they were probably considered the best offensive line in the country last year.
That's your answer, Jason. Good teams with offensive lines do lose. Jim
But big
Clark.
time players make big time plays in big time games.
Jim Clark, Nuno C3 on Twitter says, "Who wins? Not the game, but the matchups between a great O line and a great D line."
I think it's not just the matchups. I think it's the scheme. Are you
Mm-hmm.
prepared to do what you need to do to win? Um, Ultimately, I think Miami wins those matchups because obviously they this is what they do, but I think they're also going to be prepared to counter what Indiana does well.
Stephen Thunder, 56 Blaxican says, Does the result of the title game determine what we do at QB next season? Nope. All the quarterbacks are off the board, man. They're pretty much done. So at this point, I think it's Ty Simpson, Husan Longstreet, or the staff as it is.
Now, here's just something I'm floating, which Miami never does because of their academic rigor and requirements to enter the school. They rarely take JUCO guys. Now, a JUCO guy would be considered a grad transfer, would not need to meet the portal window, just the class start window,
Everybody's got to meet the portal window these days. New
including
rules.
JUCO guys.
Everybody.
Okay, there goes that. See, I'm 0 for 2 today.
It's all right. Javier B. J Boy 1724, friend of the show, says, "Start at the bottom, now we're here. What's up, mi gente? There's a big size difference between our O line and their D line. Some are saying that doesn't matter, but I would think it's a huge deal. What say you? How can it be an advantage for either team? Feliz Año Nuevo."
Feliz Año Nuevo. Again, yeah, it's an advantage, but again, it's you can have advantages in life and in anything you do, but it's what you do with those advantages. You can't just line it up and expect that the size advantage is going to be the determining factor. You have to
Mm-hmm.
couple that and combine that with schematic advantages and a plan that goes in there and takes advantage of those size differentials.
Goldilocks, fanalists underscore FR says, "If you were not a fan, but instead strictly an unbiased bettor, what number would you need to bet Miami? 11 and a half? I think 11 and a half is a great number if you can get that betting against Miami. But right now, I think 8.5. I think 8-point game is probably the most that Indiana beats them by. I could see Miami being within one score of this regardless. Picking Miami to win, I already told you that. So I would bet Miami with even less than that. But I think as a gambler, what I would feel comfortable with is 8.5, and that's what the number is right now. I think I wouldn't let it slip under 7.
Yeah, I mean that sounds good to me. I'm not a gambler.
Dolomite 79. What the hell are we doing at QB for next year? Going into next year with Emery as a starter is malpractice after making the Natty. Here's where I'm going to take this, Dolomite. You're not going to win the national championship every year. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but repeating as a national champion has not been easy for anybody. And part of that is the transfer portal, right? And how backups leave. I think for Miami's sake, we look at this roster right now as constructed. Are they a national championship team next year? Constructed, losing Ruben Bain and Francis Mauinoa and all the guys that they're losing? Probably not, right? I mean, that's a lot to replace. Does it mean they can't be a playoff team or a contender like they were this year? I think they can. So to call it malpractice to go with Emery, I don't know that I would go that far because I think proof of concept is here. And that proof of concept is that Mario knows how to win with the offensive and defensive line. He proved it this year.
And the other thing is this: we don't know it's going to be Emery. We don't know if it's going to be Luke Nickel or we don't know if it's going to be Darian Coleman. We don't know who the quarterback is going to be. The other thing is we don't see these guys in practice every day. We don't know the level of confidence they've gained with these guys over a season's worth of evaluation in Emery's couple years now and the progress he's made. So, I mean, if they feel comfortable doing it at this point, you got to trust the process. It's gotten them to this point, obviously with a transfer quarterback, but who knows? Who knows what they have up their sleeve or what they feel like they have coming into next season?
Tony Perez had a second question. Big Chilean 63. He says, with it seeming like Miami is scrambling for a quarterback again, how long do they continue to go to the portal for a quarterback? I don't know that that cycle ever ends, brother. There's not a lot of teams that are recruiting at the high school level and developing anymore, right? I think it ends when you land somebody that you truly believe in. And I think for Miami's sake, going into this season, nobody felt comfortable with Emory Williams being the starter. Nobody felt comfortable starting, a true freshman or one of the other guys on the roster. So they had to go out and get a quarterback. I think it's different this time around because they've proven on the offensive and defensive lines that they can win with an average quarterback. Carson Beck has not been special, right? Like they haven't won a game because Carson Beck was throwing the ball over the yard. They've won every single one of these playoff games because they were the best team at the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
All right. This is Jordan J-325. Do I sell my car, a kidney, or start selling feet picks to buy 3 tickets to the game?
Listen, if you could earn money with the feet picks and do that, then forget the game, bro. You got yourself a nice little retirement plan there.
G, this is the last question of the day. G from 305 Sports Fan 7. When we win on Monday, will it be considered the most impressive championship win ever, considering the path we took to get there? It's a good question to wrap this up on, Carlos. If Miami completes the mission, we've seen them have undefeated teams win national championships before. Where do you put this in terms of achievements by this organization?
I think it's right up there with 83. I think 83 is the top of the mountain just because of what they overcame to get there, where the program was before Howard Schnellenberger, what it took to get it to that level, how they created this new system of recruiting, of locking down South Florida, of opening up the offense, of doing different things that weren't being done necessarily in college football to counter those teams that were going, just wishbone, power eye, beating those Big Eight teams that were perennial national champions. And shifting the game a little bit. And I think this team in some sense has done that as well. They've gone away from what everybody's doing now, which is, the thing in Miami started. They started the wide open pass game pro style. Now it's gone to the wide open spread. Most teams have gone to that. They feel that's the way to go. Lighter, smaller, faster. Miami's gone inverse and gone bigger, stronger, tougher. And they've changed the game again on its head like Indiana has. And the model, the concept has been proven by both teams. So I think it's right up there with 83. The road to it is probably the toughest because of the teams they had to play on the way there and the impressive fashion they did it, but then also they take a hit because of the 2 regular season losses.
Yeah, I think, look, Miami wins the championship. Everybody's going to be happy down here in South Florida. I don't know that you need to compare it to 01
right,
or any of the other teams. I think, certainly the 01 team is the greatest from a talent perspective. I think most of the 80s guys would tell you that. I think the 89 team, that roster was fabulous. A lot of people think that's maybe the greatest Hurricanes team of all time. Look, regardless, it will have been a tremendous season for Mario Cristobal and a just game changer overall for the program. They've reached a point now where you don't have to even say that they're back because you just know that they're not going anywhere. And I think for a long time, we had the view of the negative thing. They're not going anywhere.
right.
Well, now they're where they need to be, and they're going to stay there. And I have faith in that because of the guy running the show and because of the people backing them financially. They don't want to go back. They don't want to be the old new Miami, right? They want to just be the new Miami that is here to stay and in contention year after year after year. That's what they paid Mario Big for. That's what they continue to pay to build this roster year to year to year. And I don't think anything's going to change. I think Miami will continue to be a preeminent power in the ACC conference. And as long as they're that, they will be in the playoff on every single year. And then it's just a matter of, do they get hot? Do they have the right quarterback? Do they have the right system, the right offense that they're running? Do they have a Malachi Tony making plays? Do they have a big running back like Mark Fletcher? The names and faces will change. The team playing will not.
The system and the structure is really what's going to make this go forward. If they continue to reload and continue to just build the same way they built to this point, and improve upon it, then they're going to be here more often than not. And even if they don't make championships or win championships, making the playoffs year after year, being competitive, being in the mix again, is something I'm looking forward to, and not getting my teeth kicked in every other year.
Nobody has to make fun of you anymore, Carlos. I mean, that's what Calais Campbell told me. He says, I can finally talk shit again. That's what he told me in Phoenix.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's been a while.
It's been a while. He's Carlos Ledo, representative of the Little Havana delegation, as well as his own podcast.
That has not aired a single episode this year, but we're doing it. We're doing it only on Wide right now. We're exclusive.
That's right. I'm Manny Navarro of The Athletic. We are Miami guys, born and bred, enjoying this season. Win or lose Monday, we're going to come back and have more show for you.
Either way, baby, when the games win and that trophy's raised, we're going to be here.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Wide Right. We will see you next week.